Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Let's Chat. My name is Shayla Reeves, and today we're going to be talking about crafting connections that count. Networking is one of those things that can really change the trajectory of your life. If somebody knows someone who knows someone, and you can be in the room or at least get connected to someone in the room, it can really be that step that pushes you and your journey forward. So, we're going to be talking to some folks today that will be offering some insight, tips, tools, and things that have worked for them when it comes to networking and crafting those meaningful connections that have pushed them forward in their own personal journeys. So, at this time, I'm going to play a quick intro and give folks a few more minutes to join us, about a minute and a half or so, and then we'll go ahead and launch into the conversation from there.
I always like to create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions. You don't always know what you don't know. You may not have it all figured out today, and that's okay. Taking one step at a time, those glimmers become a consistent light. It all finally begins to click. Each and every moment that you experience is shaping the person you are in this life to be.
Sometimes our pain points go all the way back to childhood.
What if I allowed myself to imagine a life that was more spacious and expansive than the one I'm living?
What if I don't have to live the same way that everyone else is living?
When you are authentic, your energy changes and the people around you change. It's just like doors just start opening. You're like, well, wait, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did this happen? You're showing up completely different.
And often it does require healing and going in some uncomfortable spaces before we can truly flourish.
Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and launch into our conversation on crafting connections that count. We have an amazing group of people giving about an hour of their time tonight to and hopefully share some tips and tools and techniques with you that will push you forward as you network, maybe look for that next opportunity, try to get yourself in the room of some important conversations, and they'll share some things that have worked for them along their personal journey. First, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Teresa here. Teresa is a connector, presenter, and author of Win Win Networking and 50 Fun Things, the founder of Win Win Connects. She is joining us this evening. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. We also have Adam Cho. Am I saying your name right? Yay!
Correct.
Thank you. Entrepreneur in residence with Lunar Startups. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation today. We also have Danielle Steer with us, the founding executive director for Lunar Startups. We've got Javante Patton. And Javante, I just realized when I put my graphic out, I left off one of your Billboard recording titles. I think you're 5-time and not 4-time now. So I apologize for that.
But hey,
yes,
it's okay. It's okay. Thank you, guys.
Congratulations. 5-time #1 chart-topping Billboard recording artist, composer, producer, entrepreneur extraordinaire, connector, all of those things. Thanks for joining us. And then last but not least, we have the awesome Alex Merritt. joining us today. Alex is the love engineer, creator, and host of Dessert and Discussion, Lovenar, and the War on Love game. Thank you so much for joining us today, all of you. I want to start by giving you each about a minute or so to let everybody know kind of a little bit about who you are, your journey, your experience. Let people know where we can start this conversation with you as it relates to crafting connections that count. I'll go ahead and start with you, Alex. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So it's always a fun question, right? And great connections, being able to answer it, I guess, is one of the ways. But there are plenty of things to start. But for starters, I am a connection enthusiast in the sense of I have always had an insatiable curiosity about how and why things work. Born and raised in St. Louis, that's where I'm from, and have moved around quite a bit. And in the relocation process, be that to school, be that to different states and cities for employment, I've had to learn quickly how to connect, because no matter where you go, the relationships you build are the things that make the place worth it.
That is so true. Crafting connections that count. Javante, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota. So a lot of my relationships have just transpired through just living here, just going to school here, living in certain neighborhoods, and I have just connected to a variety of different people, singing, just a lot of different things just caused me to have an extensive network of amazing people. So, I think that answers your question.
It does. Good job. Thank you so much. Danielle, would you like to go next?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. What a treasure to be connected to all of these amazing guests. I'm so excited for that opportunity in and of itself. So as founding executive director at Lunar Startups, we talk a lot about the importance of social capital, or the idea of who you have in your network that can help you build your company better, faster, smarter, bigger, if that's your ambition. And I think that this is such a great conversation, because we know that entrepreneurship is a team sport, and it really is dependent upon how a person is able to put relevant connections around them that can help activate and move the business forward. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from your other guests and to chatting more about the value of connections and what it really means to build authentic relationships that can help, support you and support your business.
And speaking of crafting connections that count, I know one of the things that you told me when I invited you to be a part of this conversation, you said it's very important for you to bring someone else into the room. And part of that conversation led to Adam being a part of the conversation tonight. So I'm so glad to have you, Adam. Can you tell me a little bit about you as well?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm born and raised here in Minnesota, first generation. I've only been in the entrepreneurship space for about 6 years now. And when I first got started, I didn't know that many people. And, the whole saying of it's not what you know, but who you know, really rang true. And so for the first 2 or 3 years, I spent a lot of time actively pursuing relationships with other people, because I felt as though in the long run, it would pay off dividends. And so in that same time frame, that's when I met Danielle, and it's all come full circle. And now we work together. So happy to share whatever wisdom I might be able to.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. And last but not least, Teresa, kind of talking about connections again. Jasmine was hoping to join us tonight, but she's traveling, and you know how travel can be. Sometimes the flights are great and they work, and sometimes you get behind. And she said, hey, I can't be with you, but here's this great person that can take my place. And so I'm so excited to meet you, Teresa, and hear about the insight that you'll be able to offer for tonight's conversation as well. Tell us a little bit about you, though.
Yeah, that is a great example of networking, isn't it? That she turns to her network and brings me in. So I'm Teresa, and I'm all about living lives that are full of meaningful connections and joy and fulfillment. And my umbrella brand is Win-Win Connects, which the purpose is to bring people together to have those connections that are meaningful and purposeful and filled with joy. And basically what that means is I bring really awesome people together to dream, imagine, and take action on the lives they want personally and professionally through networking, through workshops, retreats, etc.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining me here. So, when it comes to networking, for some people, it's an easy thing. Like, I know, Javante, part of your story, when you were little, it started in the church. You were singing at 4, you were writing music at 6. Church is like the
Community.
connection space extraordinaire, right?
Yes, it's community. It's a whole bunch of people that live in the same community.
Yeah, and for you, how influential and impactful was church and expanding, growing your network? You seem like you're a naturally outgoing person, and I'm sure that probably helped too, right?
Absolutely. No, church was a huge blessing for me. I'm not as religious as my church background probably would make it seem like I would be, but honestly, I grew up with probably about, I would say maybe 40 people, right? That I seen every Sunday, that I seen every Wednesday, choir rehearsal, a lot out throughout the week. And I have to say, to this day, those 40 people are my Facebook friends. They support my music. They know my children. I mean, and it built me so many different resources. And so when people frown upon church nowadays because of all of the theology and what they don't believe, what they do believe, I think it has caused a generation to almost miss connecting with the community of just really great people. So I love my connections with the church, and to this day, it's a blessing to me, and I look forward to meeting newer people in church now with my children.
And the nice thing about having that core group of 40 people is those people know people. And, the investment and the work that you're doing and building those relationships, they can
Yes,
speak for you in other spaces and maybe create different connections for you in some ways,
yes.
right?
Yes, I have gotten so many great opportunities to sing, to speak, paid opportunities just by way of someone saying, "Oh, I know Javante. Let me call him and see." And I try not to do the even in like stardom and doing really well on charts and stuff. I try to keep not so much a mom and pop shop feel, but I just try to keep that organic community feel where people can still have a number to call me because some of my best opportunities have been nowadays through a text message, through a DM, like, "Hey, do you know such and such? They were looking for a singer." And it's like, "Wait, I'm singing for who? Kanye West? Sure, I'll do it." So I have gained a career opportunity, income just from networking in the community that I've grown up with.
That's so true. And so much of how we communicate now, it's nonverbal. I mean, before you had to go to the networking events and you had to see people face to face. But like you mentioned, a lot of how we meet and get to know people, it's those text threads, it's through social media. How do you feel, Danielle, social media is changing the space that you're in? As someone that's trying to help entrepreneurs get started and begin their journeys.
Absolutely. I think this is a really relevant question now as we see, the experiences that many people have had over the past couple of years, mostly being at home or mostly kind of being in a digital space, whether it's examples like this or on Zoom or on social media. We've talked a lot about how people are meeting other people via social media, whether that's on Twitter, for example. Adam and I are in the entrepreneurial space, in the investment space. There's an investor Twitter, right? And we know people who've received investment because they've been sending out updates, communicating regularly, and just connecting with people and finding points of alignment. Adam's big into crypto, and so he's gotten me involved more in kind of the social media space around cryptocurrency. And I think that we see that with brands, we see that with individuals. We're in danger right now of I think there's an all-time high lonely factor happening in terms of people feeling disconnected. And there's this weird tension between social media actually continuing to bridge a bigger gap or create a wider divide for people feeling lonely. But also, it's also been the only tool we've had for a couple of years in some ways. So there's this weird, I think, point of change that we're in as a culture and as a society globally and locally, where we're kind of moving through those components. But we know that small businesses especially, it's the best way to get to connect with your consumer. For people who are looking for others who can help them solve problems, we know it's really effective. And you see that in a lot of the marketing of these social media platforms these days, whether it's Meta or YouTube or any of the others. They're really trying to sell that as a place of connection.
And when it comes to connection, I know, Alex, you work a lot with people in relationships and connecting. And this space that we're in right now, it does look a lot different. And I'm sure probably for you in the space that you're in and trying to help people build relationships and build connections, do you find that the way that you're going about telling people to build their network, is it evolving too?
You know, it's funny because I think the pandemic forced everybody to understand the value of online dating, for example, or for a while you could ignore it. You had an option, whereas when the pandemic hit, it became one of those things like, do you embrace it? Or do you wait until things go back to quote unquote normal? And I think if this time has taught us nothing else, is that we are creating a new normal, whether we like it or not. And so the value of being able to connect, you know, to Danielle's point, is this reality of that we are making connections. We are, meeting new people. We are, if we're willing to let go of how it must be true, right? So before, it had to be at the happy hour. It had to be live and in living color, if you will. But now with video and technology, we can actually still foster really, really solid connections if we are open to the idea that this is equally as valuable, not identical to, but equally as valuable as some of the other methods under which we would have made connections.
So really what I'm hearing, and maybe Teresa, you can talk about this too, when it comes to networking, you do have to have a willingness to be flexible in some ways, right?
Well, we have really had to adapt, like Danielle and had talked about. We're in a strange space right now. We're figuring out ways to connect. Connecting is the key thing that we need for well-being, according to research. Without connection, connection is what we have as a basis for our well-being. And so I will say, like Alex was mentioning, that we are learning the value of the online networking and connecting. And I have to be honest that before the pandemic hit, I had a strong preference and really thought that in-person networking was better because I was running networking events, I was helping people with networking, and I had a preference for that. I will say that now that we've shifted to online and that technology has really innovated in the ways we've connected, that there are a lot of positive things to be said about the online connection as far as borderless networking, for example. Now, I've been able to have amazing connections with people I would have never met because we have that accessibility of not having to be in the same room and happening to show up at the same event. So I'm finding a lot of benefits, but I will say that it is a strange place because people are feeling zoomed out and craving that human connection. And so we're all navigating this together. So my key thing that I share with people is to be gentle on yourself and gentle on others as we navigate this new way of connecting.
So be kind to yourself. I know we're probably our own worst critic. Adam, I wanted to ask you, you've been on your entrepreneurship journey, you said, for the last 6 years. What, as it relates to networking and crafting connections, I guess, what lessons do you feel are like, these are the ones that are really helping me turn a corner, or are there just specific relationships that you feel have really pushed you forward on this journey? I want to say too, before you answer that, Javante's going to have to hop off in about like 5 or 6 minutes. I know he's got to sing. So if he hops off, that he's got another arrangement, but I do
My
appreciate.
apologies.
Yes, but I wanted to say that before he disappears on us. Adam, go right ahead if you could.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned early on was the burnout aspect when you do it in person can be very real. You meet a lot of people. You have to have a certain energy when you meet somebody because you only have one shot in a lot of cases to make an impact in terms of their impression of you, but also the same way for them when they're interacting with you. And so at first I tried to meet a lot of people very quickly, and then I realized that maybe that wasn't the best approach, and trying to find meaningful connections and taking it a little bit slower, because if you meet somebody and you connect very well, I think naturally you get an opportunity to leverage that person to find 2 or 3 other high value connections that once you build that social equity with that other individual, they're more willing to offer that to you as well in a similar manner. And so I mean, Danielle is a great example, right? I met Danielle through someone else. I can't remember who it is, but through another meaningful interaction, I got connected with Danielle, and that was 4 or 5 years ago now. And at this stage, it all came full circle, and now we work together. So you just never know what connections turn into what engagements in the future.
So you really have to have a willingness to put yourself out there, and so that you can be found, and so that people can find you, so that those relationships have the potential to grow at all. Before you go, Javante, I wanted to ask you quickly about social media and how being able to utilize social media has helped your platforms evolve, has helped you build your relationships, your connections, expand them. How has that played into your connections and networking journey?
It's played a very pivotal role. It has changed the game, so to speak. And I say that because when you live in Minneapolis and you are an entertainer, or you're born and raised in poverty or in the poor, North Minneapolis, you don't always get the opportunity to connect with people when it comes to the traditional way of getting on a plane, getting on a bus, staying in a hotel, shaking hands with the who's who's of this city or this state or this industry. So what happens is you get a chance to be in the face of people that you will never be able to afford to be in the face due to just this one device in your hand. And I applaud TikTok stars and Instagram stars because it's a way of income, not only that they deserve, but they actually need, that they never would have got the opportunity to have. So social media has been that for me. And it's also been like it's also like a great phone book where you can keep up with people that you meet. Like when I meet people, I don't even say what's their number anymore. I'll be like, what's your Instagram? Because 2 years later, 2 weeks later, it's like I just see them scrolling. I just comment like, oh, your baby's getting so big. So you have created like these new family members where you watch their kids grow up, you watch their successes, and then you gain a level of support when family members may pass away. You get just like this outpouring of love from not so much strangers, but in the traditional sense, strangers who don't really know you. Oh, well, I'm here for you, or I sent you guys some money. Or so social media has changed the game because it's caused me to garnish a lot of fans, be in the algorithm, and just go further than what the traditional touring would I would have to do.
That's such a great point, because when you just exchange numbers with someone, or even if you just send them an email afterwards and say, I'm so glad to meet you, you don't really get a sense sometimes at a networking event about the wholeness and the fullness of who that
Yes,
person is. Yeah.
yes,
And
and
yeah,
to be nosy.
that too. And sometimes you can learn additional things about that person. Maybe you have things in common that you didn't realize, and you can get into a conversation that maybe is more in alignment with what your similar interests are, that maybe you didn't have a chance to talk about. And it sparks, a stronger connection, a stronger relationship. And maybe that's someone that you keep in touch with in a different way. What would you say on that as well, Alex?
Absolutely. So when he was saying the inside, I was like, yes, that's exactly it. Because the reality is that what happens on social media, when you think about it, people post what they want you to know, whatever that might be. And when you think about when you have a phone call or a conversation with someone, or you meet them wherever, that's the same conversation that you're going to have. Is what someone wants you to know, and what social media allows you to do. Devontae calls it being nosy, but it's not even nosy in that sense. It's like you get to observe, and you're invited into this person's world. They posted it on social media, it's because they want somebody to know it, and it's an aspect that allows you to get into some insights that you would have never broken conversation. Actually, it would have never come up. Like, there's people who've known each other they've been talking for years and don't know some of the things you can find out about somebody if you follow them on Instagram or Facebook or things of that sort. So I think social media has actually given us an opportunity to have much richer conversations and connections, because many times you wouldn't even ask the question about the dinner they made, because you didn't even know they could cook until they posted the picture about it. And so I think it's a fascinating approach.
Fair.
That is such a great point. And I know even for myself, when I'm trying to find people for Let's Chat, people will be on other people's pages or tagged, and I'm like, I wonder who this is. And then I'll go on their page, and I was like, oh my gosh, they'll fit for this conversation I'm trying to have. And so then you kind of bring in new people, new faces, and your circle expands just by virtue of social media.
Yeah.
Javante, you got to leave us, don't you?
I gotta go. Thank you guys for having me. I'm going to
Yes.
sing, but follow me on Instagram so I can see
Yes.
what you got cooking.
It's ticking across the bottom. Please follow any one of the participants today. Bye, Javante.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say as well, social media, I know some people are kind of reluctant still to be on it, but a lot of people are. If they're on one platform, at least maybe they're Facebook and not Instagram, or maybe they're Instagram and TikTok and not Facebook, whatever, or Twitter, whatever your choice is. You sometimes have to identify like what networks work for you, for your audience. Maybe the people that follow you are like older, and maybe they're more Facebookers, or if you have a younger audience, maybe they're more into Instagram and TikTok. So part of crafting those connections means figuring out who your audience is, and how do you cater your content to them, and how do you go where they are so that they can find you. What would you say on that, Danielle?
I love that. It makes me think of, in before times, when we were doing a lot of networking events, I think a lot of them were kind of predispositioned to benefit extroverts, right? Like you had to be able to walk into a room and go and talk to somebody you didn't know, and talk to a stranger and do the small talk thing. And that's quite frankly, it's just not for everybody. And also, if you're coming from a cultural background that might be different than maybe the environment you're walking into there, and there's not enough signals or not enough communication about what it means to operate effectively in that environment, that's how exclusion happens, right? Whether intentional or not. And so I think that one of the things that we're excited about in terms of how networking and connecting is evolving is that there's just more access. And I think people who might identify as introverts have a few extra pathways for engagement that didn't look like the before times. And so, in Minnesota, people are incredibly generous with their time, we have found, in the business sector, and jumping on a Zoom call or jumping on a Google Hangout is pretty easy. And a lot of people are willing to do that for 20 or 30 minutes, just with like a cold email or an intro from a friend. And being able to show up as how you want in that moment in a digital space sometimes can be a little bit less intimidating for someone who's nervous or new, or feels like maybe they're not ready yet. And we love encouraging people to, even before you feel ready, to take those leaps, take those jumps, go talk to new people, because it really, really does impact the long-term success of your business, or your ability to connect with new customers. And quite frankly, Adam and I know this intimately. Entrepreneur, I'm sure the rest of our guests do too. Entrepreneurship is really lonely. Like at baseline, it's such a hard job to choose. And so being able to find other people, regardless of if you're introverted or extroverted or ambivert, we can put people in whatever box we want, but just the fact that there are more options for connecting, I think, is a boon for all of us.
Yes. And so just like Javante had said too, it's a way to sort of level the playing field and give more people a chance to be in the room, even if the room is Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or TikTok, whatever the room is. More people have an opportunity to be found in the room, to connect in the room, to be heard in the room. And you can really take ownership over your space and the space that you claim in a different kind of way. I wanted to ask you, Teresa, as well, about the importance of identifying the networking style that works best for you, and why that is so key. Because some folks might say, okay, I want to take this journey. I need to connect. I need to network. I don't know where to start. I'm maybe more introverted by nature, and I need to grow. And the only way I'm going to grow is to get out there. How do I start this journey? How do I create this path?
Yeah, well, so many good points have been brought up, and I loved your analogy, Shayla, about finding the right room that works for you, or rooms. with networking, and also what we were talking about with accessibility. It makes a huge difference. What I always suggest is there is not, I don't believe that there's a cookie cutter approach to networking. And like everybody here has been talking about, we want to find what works best for us. And some of that comes from trial and error, but we can avoid a lot of frustration when we turn internally to the network that we already have. So sometimes people approach networking as chasing, like I always got to find the new person, the next person. But if we turn internally to the network that we have already and leverage them and are really strategic about who we connect with, they will lead to the right people in the right rooms for us. So, for example, a lot of students or recent graduates get really, really nervous about their networking because they have a network of their peers. But while they're in college, they have their professors, their guest lecturers, they have their internship coordinators. They have this wealth of connections that they can build and then ask those connections who already know and care about their success who else they should know. So all of us can do that wherever stage we are at in our journey, is look at those connections that care about us and say, hey, this is my goal. This is where I want to go next. Who would you recommend? What would you be willing to make that connection for me? Or let me know what rooms, like you said, Shayla, would you recommend? What types of events, what types of groups, what types of opportunities? So I really want to underscore this whole accessibility piece with connecting online now and having more options. And so we do have the luxury now to find what works for us where we're at and where our goals are.
That's so true. And Adam, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to your growth over the last 6 years, how important has it been to be consistent and to follow up? And how have those pieces pushed you forward in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always made it a mission of mine when I'm networking to make it as easy as possible for the other person on the other side. So, I go to them or offer times so it doesn't become a administrative assistant type of responsibility for them to get connected. I think the lower friction that I could make it, the better outcomes I've had on the other side of it. And I think these genuine relationships that have come from it, not every single person you meet becomes a lifelong colleague or network individual that you can rely on. But the cool thing is now people are referred to me, even if I'm not looking for more networking. Someone knows that I might know somebody, so then I get connected with somebody cool. Even if I'm not pursuing it by any means actively, it's become more of like a passive networking growth opportunity. So there's a certain inflection point where you become someone that people want to find, and then you grow organically from that regard. So what started out as a kind of a full-time job of growing my network is now kind of like a passive job almost.
And that means you're sort of able to focus your energy in other areas because the networking part is becoming more fluid.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a ramp up time, and then once you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get your groove and you figure out the pacing and the cadence that you appreciate, it becomes a little bit automated in a sense. And so I think initially there's a little bit of rolling up your sleeves and putting in some effort, but if you're committed to it, it becomes easier over time.
And that's such an important point. I mean, sometimes it's so easy to get discouraged. We live in a world where everybody wants everything right now. You see the celebrities and the stars on your social media feeds, but we're all consuming them when they are the celebrities and the stars that we see. But they all went through that period where nobody was paying attention to them. They were having to hustle really hard, and the doors that maybe are now a phone call away, they had to do 10 or 15 knocks to even get one of them to open. And so we have to be patient. And sometimes, that's really hard to do in the world where we see, what people are now, but we didn't see the journey that they took to get there. And so we think, oh, they're a star. Well, I want to wake up tomorrow and do this, but it's not always that easy. It's a lot of work. But if you commit and put in the time and the effort to whatever your passion may be, that door that you're desperately hoping to open. It may take you some time, but if you're committed to that goal or that dream, you can get there. Let's see, I've got one message here from Lorraine. Great insights earlier for introverts. Thank you so much, Lorraine. And then we have Chrissy is a viewer watching that she enjoys watching the team in the morning. Glad you're here in Minnesota. I'm glad to be in Minnesota too. Thank you so much, Chrissy. I wanted to talk, Alex, a little bit about your area of expertise. And I think it's so interesting. And I think you navigate the relationship space, like you think of relationships between people romantically, but some of these understandings that you teach people, they can translate to business and networking too. Just simple things. And I say simple, but it's really not simple when you think about it. But how men and women communicate, we communicate differently. And what women, you say we like to tell more stories. And so sometimes when we're talking to men, they may tune us out if we're going into a big, long story about something. And they just want to tell me what I'm going to do right now and just get it done. And sometimes that may play into your business networking relationships too, and knowing how to speak with the individual that you're trying to connect with, and making sure that you're communicating with them in a style where they'll hear you matters too. If you could talk a little bit about that, but tell us first how you kind of came to that space. You are like an engineer by trade, and kind of tell us a little bit how you came to that understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I always get the love engineer. It's I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. So a legit engineer with a patent in the whole nine. But the insight is that, what engineers do, again, a lot of it is about solving problems and cause and effect. That's what a lot of the time is spent trying to understand. And so I've always had this insatiable curiosity, like I said, about how and why things work, especially people in relationships, honestly. And so my mind just thinks, whatever you see me, again, know that I'm wondering, why is that like that? And so when it comes down to communication, it really came forward, literally, the whole, this delineation, if you will, between the two is because I was in the market for a computer. And I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna get a Mac. This is pretty. And literally bought a Mac computer thinking that it operated like the computers I was used to, which were PCs. And oftentimes when we go into communication or connection, people are like, no, I talk, you talk. We clearly are talking. We get it. Right. But if you have ever used a Mac, it is not like a PC in its entirety. Actually, the operating system is fundamentally different, in fact. And so borrowing that insight, the insight from a PC versus a Mac, and you can't turn a PC into a Mac, just like you cannot turn another person's communication style and how they operate and what brought them to who they are into something different. But if you understand it and have appreciation for it, then you can get the best of both of the systems, right? And so that is what inspired what now is dubbed as this connected communications, which is this idea of there's a direct operating system and a collaborative operating system of communication, right? And, they follow traditional gender approach is the way it started. But the truth of the matter is just some people are more direct and some people are more collaborative in their operating style. And that by, the direct operating system is what is the point? The collaborative operating system is let me tell you the story. And so it's just understanding that as you're engaging with people, and you'll know their style by how they talk.
And one of the examples, I think when we first talked about this, you were saying, when you went to find something to eat with a group of male engineers. Can you talk a little bit about that, just so people can understand just the difference here?
Absolutely. So that's the thing about being a mechanical engineer is that, 20 years ago when I was getting my degree, there weren't a lot of women in the space, period. And they're getting better now, and there still are not a lot. But nevertheless, I would find myself as the only woman often because it was me and a bunch of men, amazing men, by the way. But it was I just didn't have the numbers. But every lunchtime, I'll never forget it. But at lunchtime, we were like, hey, let's go, get something to eat. One of the guys would be like, let's go to, Longhorn. And everybody would be like, okay. And we go, and I'm like, so there's no discussion here? We're not gonna, but my girlfriends and I, the same exact conversation is, hey, let's let's go get something to eat. And Danielle and Teresa and I would spend 15 minutes, not because we had to. Danielle would be like, hey, I know there's this new cool Thai place down the street. Teresa would be like, no, I saw this. I mean, and we'd have a whole dialogue. And then we'd pick something that nobody brought up. Hey, I also saw this cool, sandwich joint. How about we go there? And then we'd be like, okay. And I kept seeing that. I was like, the guys don't have a dialogue. They just make a decision and they go. But with women, it's like, oh no, every single time, my friend, and it would never occur to me to be like, Teresa and Danielle, we're going to McDonald's with no dialogue. It just doesn't make sense. And you see them shaking their head, but Adam is like, yep.
But and I wanted you to talk about that because, and I even see this even sometimes if I'm talking to my husband, because I tell stories. And so when you think about taking your personal style into a networking space, if I'm telling my stories to someone that just wants to be to the point, then they're not going to hear my point because they've already tuned me out. So you have to know, as part of crafting your connections that count, how to talk to the people that you want to hear you. Yeah. And trying to communicate and learn to communicate in a way so that those folks stay with you and they get what you need from that, what you need them to get from that conversation.
And the one thing I would add to that, and so because it gets a little daunting, but again, if you can, the PC Mac thing, people get that, where it's like, there's nothing you can do that can switch the two. So it becomes an appreciation. So rather than you should listen, and it's like, no, actually, I get to be aware. It's like, wait, am I on a PC or a Mac? Because if I'm on a Mac, Control Alt Delete does nothing. But if I'm on a PC, Control Alt Delete are the magical keys, and you can keep hitting them if you like on a Mac, but you get no outcome. And so adapt. You have to be willing to add some more skills. That's it.
Yes. And so it really goes back to being flexible. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with either style. It's learning how and when to use those styles in order to be effective and really be heard in a way. Yeah. Danielle?
I think the other way, if I can add on to that, I think
yes,
the other aspect of what you're talking about is knowing your own style and being able to hack it for good and for bad, right? Because every characteristic we have as a human can be seen as a strength or as a weakness, depending on how you slice it. So one of the things I always like to do, I find I get really nervous at networking events when you're supposed to do the small talk and talk about what you're doing. But if I come from a place that's very authentic to me in the sense of I'm curious about others. So how can I be asking better questions? Because the better questions I ask, the better answers people are going to provide me that are more interesting and get to the root of who we are. The other aspect of it is if you are trying to achieve certain aspects, like advance your business or connect with a specific person at an event or otherwise, getting a hype squad, I find to be outrageously helpful. So I have a girlfriend, Dion Gums, who is one of our experts in residence over at Lunar, and she and I will go to an event and we'll work it together. And I get to walk in and I get to say, have you met Dion Gums, the woman building Minnesota's first Black woman-owned fintech bank? Like, let me tell you all about how awesome she is. And it's so fun for me because I get to brag about a friend. And then she'll do the same, for the next person that we meet. And it makes it so that we can build each other up. We can build our confidence, and we get to hack sometimes when we're a little nervous about meeting somebody. And also we learn something new about each other every time we get to do that. I also really, Alex, that story was so spot on. I think Adam and I were on 3 different calls today where he had a moment where he was like, well, why don't we do this? And his other 2 colleagues, myself and another woman, were like, well, let's talk about it. So I think hopefully he feels very seen right now that this is a new opportunity for us to think about our professional relationship together.
Or bring me in. Connected Communications has done wonders for teams like that to help just understand it. So literally for that reason, because it's just an awareness. And once you're aware, you're like, oh, okay. Because I'll be honest, because I was trained by men, I communicate directly. I'm a direct operating system person. So then I get with some women and they're like, whoa, you don't want to story? I'm like, no, let's get to it. And they're like, we don't like her. So it's just being aware of that.
Adam, I saw you kind of chuckling with some of the perspectives. What struck you so far on some of the points we've been talking about here?
Well, I think it's important to understand when you're doing this networking thing that we're all salespeople, right? So we're selling um, our personality to others. And once you, like Danielle said and Alex have said, once you understand your style and the style of other people, it kind of it's an aha moment for you, and your networking game goes up exponentially. I think. I like to think of it as a 80-20. I always offer 80% of a conversation, but if someone's more reserved and they don't want to speak, I can always jump in and speak more to remove that awkward silence. And I think it's okay to not fill a full 30-minute meeting if you don't have 30 minutes of content to talk about. Always go for less. It's better to leave them wanting more. So 15-minute Zoom call, especially in this world today where you don't have to go get a coffee with somebody. Back in the day, you felt obligated if you're going to make someone drive to you and spend money or whatever for a coffee to give them a good 30, 40 minutes. But now with Zoom, you can just do a 15-minute and you're in and out and everyone's good and you don't feel awkward. And so if people can just remember that you're selling yourself, your personality, your brand, your vision. And then on top of that, the 80-20 rule, if they want to talk for 80% of the time, then it's a good meeting for me. I'd much rather have someone else speak and command the conversation than myself, but being willing to then also jump in if they aren't that type of person.
And so you really have to be able to I wouldn't say understand, but maybe adapt to the situation that you're in. Because sometimes if folks are used to being the one coming in and saying everything, then maybe there are voices that don't get heard in that space, or,
Yeah.
You have to just kind of create the space so that everyone around you can have an opportunity to be seen and contribute, and no one feels left out of the space. Teresa, can you talk a little bit about if are there rules for professional networking, or do we throw rules out the door in the world that we're in? Like if we were in the pre-pandemic world, were those rules different from the rules that may exist now, or do the rules just evolve, or are some things always going to be there regardless of the more computer-oriented world that we're in now, or what would you offer in that space?
Well, the things that have not changed are the basics. And so you're always going to be more effective in your networking when you know why you're networking, what your goal is, and how you want to go about that and connect with people. The other things that haven't changed are if you value meaningful connection, that's going to stay important for you going forward. Your values and how you connect with people aren't going to change. We have that mindfulness about being respectful and listening and being relevant, all of that continues as well. And so when Adam was sharing about being a listener, that hasn't changed, whether it's in person or online, because the more we listen in our connections, the more we will be able to be relevant, responsive, be a good resource, be memorable, make a difference, have that connection be more than just two people talking at each other. But when I turn up myself to be a better listener and be more present, I might not say everything I had planned to say in the moment, but it gives me that base to build on. So when I follow up on LinkedIn or in another way, I'm building on that conversation versus trying to squeeze everything in. So those are some of the things that have not changed, are the basics about knowing the why and the how you're going to go about it and what fits for you. It's the methods that have changed.
That's such a great point. And to some extent, even though we have to adapt for the spaces that we're in, maybe some spaces you're having to say more, at others you're having to pull back. Knowing what your own strengths are can kind of help you position yourself, to grow or to push your own networking circle forward. For myself, for example, I always interview and have better connections with people in person. So like I will do better in person. There's just parts of my personality you don't see through a phone or necessarily. I mean, you might get glimpses on social media, but like knowing that that's my strength I have to figure out like, well, how do I create that, outside of COVID, but, normal times is how do I create that in-person moment? Because I know if I can get in front of you and we have that human connection, there's a warmth that you don't necessarily get on a screen or through a picture. And there's just aspects that make people, want to add you to their circle in a way that maybe social media doesn't allow. How important do you feel it is to identify what your strength is when it comes to networking and connecting, and then trying to figure out how to create space for that to shine or to create those opportunities? Alex, would you like to go first?
Yep. So I think it's absolutely critical to your point to know that and to intentionally create that. And I love Teresa's point around knowing why you're doing it. And I say all the time is like the time to build a relationship is before you need the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you build it from a place of that authentic, as Danielle said, I'm just curious about people. And if you come from that place, people can pick that up. No one actually likes to be used for anything. And so if you create the relationship because you need something, people can feel that no matter what you say. And so if you can create spaces where I build relationships because I build relationships, because I value people, and not because I need something, but because you might need something, and I'll be able to give that to you. So just a slight tweak in the why will pay dividends to the what and the how, right? It becomes a whole lot easier when you go to give, right? So I was like, the reason I want to know you is not because I need to get something from you. It's because I may have a whole lot to give you, actually. And I won't know that unless I know who you are and what you're doing and what you're interested in. And so then it just changes the dynamic, as I find, really fast and makes it easier. So now, yes, Danielle will reach out to me. Why? Because she knows like there's value to be added. So I think it's important that we go in from a standpoint of how do I add value to this world and to the people that I'm making these connections with, less about what do I get. I mean, I'm going to be fine. And so it's just a matter of, it's like, I am here because I think I can support. And as a result of that, I too am supported.
That's such a great perspective, because a lot of times people reach out when they're like, oh, I'm in a pinch, or oh, I need this, or oh, I need that. And that person is that energy, like, when you're being used, or when somebody is just like, they're not there for an authentic, genuine reason. And then that makes it harder to be able to call on them even beyond that, because they feel that energy. Danielle, would you like to add on to that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I love all of that. I think I'll add two things. I think one of the things we know to be true of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world is a level of self-awareness. So an ability to really reflect on yourself, to listen when other people are maybe noting something that kind of gives you, I like to say, like, if you can feel it in your body, there's something there to be like digging in deeper to, right? So whether it's you feel suddenly defensive because someone said something about you, or you feel suddenly like elated, both of those are triggers for you to say like, oh, this person responded positively in this way. I wonder why, and dig in, and really it's just a call for curiosity at large about your own existence, I think, as well as how you engage with those around you. The other thing that I would say is there are different tools if it might not feel natural to continue engaging with people over and over again. I think a lot of us are really emotionally exhausted. This has been a really hard couple of years, whether it's because of health, or if you're on the front lines of racial justice, or if you are just navigating having kids at home, at any given time, or the sandwich care generation, which I have recently entered into. I think that there are mechanisms that you can use to kind of like hack that and save yourself. So Adam is actually an expert. I think he teaches all of our entrepreneurs how to write a regular email update to all of the investors, or basically anybody that you meet that seems excited about your work. And in that, he's always included, what's going well, what's something he's learned, and he always has asks. And I love this about what Adam brings into that, because it also gives other people an opportunity to step in and help out. generally we find that humans want to help other humans succeed. And sometimes you just need a little bit of a pathway for that. It's one of the reasons that I actually ended up working with Adam, because he put in an email that he needed some help on a certain thing. And we said, oh, wait a second, we're doing that too. Let's do it together. And it's only because he communicated that regularly and often with us. So that doesn't, if you're not an entrepreneur, it doesn't make sense for you to have an investor update email that you send regularly, but maybe how are you communicating with your community? And if it feels like it's on social media, making sure that you're engaging actively with people. Are you tagging people? Are you sending them, hey, here's a picture of me, in front of this beautiful fall tree, or some other way that you're showing them and noting to them that there's a direct connection as part of that. I love a good email update, just generally, BCC. But I think that little mechanisms like that can help you to stay in front of people, so that when you do have to come back and say, like, I need help, they're there and they're ready and they're prompted and they're already emotionally connected to you in a way that they're going to be excited to be activated.
And talk, Adam, a little bit about how crafting that email has helped you maintain those connections that you're establishing.
Yeah, to Danielle's point, it's about just making sure you're top of mind for people. You get lost in the shuffle very quickly for other humans, especially if you're not seeing them walking down the halls of a company that you're at. So I think it's just an easy way for you to have a touch base with a lot of people with not a lot of effort, as opposed to sending out 35 texts or saying I want to jump on a Zoom call with 35 people or grab a coffee. It's just not scalable, right? But if you're sending out like a quarterly update on how things are going for you, and it can even just be personally too, there's nothing stopping you from, this is like what newsletters were before newsletters became popular. And so I think it's just a way for people to have a way to keep you in mind when you do reach out to them, because you'll be surprised, like if you tweeted something or posted on Instagram or sent an email update, what people remember when you do reach out to them. They'll say something like, oh, I remember that tweet that you sent out, or I remember that Instagram post when you went on that trip. It's like they feel more personally connected to you, even if like you haven't actually said hello to them in person in 2 years. And so it's just being top of mind, because out of sight, out of mind. And so these are just ways for you to hack that approach.
Thank you so much for that perspective. Teresa, I want to give you the last word for the day. For the person that's watching, and they've probably heard a lot today, hopefully they're taking something away. What do you say to that person that's saying, oh man, I heard a lot today. Where do I start? Can I do this? Can I build my network? What would you want that person to know when they leave here today?
I would say that the overall theme that came through today was being intentional, knowing what you want, but bringing it to the table in a way that is mutually beneficial, being a resource, making a great introduction, providing good information. When you look at your network as a way of helping each other out to succeed, then you are going to be much more effective with your networking. It's going to feel more comfortable. It's going to feel more authentic and move you forward on your goals when you have that approach, versus the chasing and sounding desperate. Build it before you need it, like Alex said, and have that approach of like, how can we do this together? How can we help each other out?
I love that. Such a great tie it up in a bow. I love it. Thank you all so much for joining me for Let's Chat today. We'll be taking a little bit of a break next week for Thanksgiving. So we'll have 3 more conversations before the year wraps up. The next couple of conversations will be happening on December the 3rd and December the 10th. I'm working to craft 5 topics that I feel can be reoccurring that people seem to connect with. And one of those so far has been the conversation on embracing the journey to authenticity. So I'm going to be hosting a couple more of those conversations in December. That'll be my 3rd and 4th of those. And then I'm thinking it's going to probably end up being one of the 5. And then I'm just learning as I go. This is my way of connecting with the Minnesota community, because being in the pandemic and moving somewhere new at a time like now, it's a little bit more tricky to meet people, but it's important to me to get to know my neighbors. So y'all are my Let's Chat family now. So I'm glad to welcome you in. And you know, I'm learning so much from each one of these conversations, like who I can call for this, who I can call for that, who I can connect this person to that's working on this or that. And it's just been a really beautiful experience to connect people who are neighbors too, and just haven't had a chance to meet through a space like this one. And hopefully, you know, through the conversations that we have, we push people watching forward. And then hopefully people who meet here in this space, maybe they collaborate and work together on projects within the community. And maybe I get to call you someday for a story, you know, we never know. And so that's been the beautiful part of the journey. And I appreciate each of you being a part of it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you all can hang around for just 1 second, I'll talk to you in the backstage area of StreamYard, and I'll go ahead and sign off on the live portion of our chat. Have a great evening, everyone.